It's absolutely madness. And I mean, obviously, you're looking at all the managerial stuff, and there's so much going on there right now. And it's just having Chelsea in the market and being so much more proactive than Tottenham are is fascinating to watch the way they're doing it, because I think everyone probably is desperate just for Chelsea to appoint their manager. And then that allows Spurs to just kind of not have a free run, because there's other clubs that are going to be in the mix, I think, in the weeks ahead. But it does let that settle down a bit. Because let's be honest, Chelsea, despite the chaos that is there, because of the power and the money involved at Chelsea, they are a more attractive proposition for a lot of managers. Of course they are. So you are kind of as if to saying, like, okay, pick who you want, and then we'll see what we're going to do, which is the wrong way to do it. I agree. I can hear people going, oh, no, that's not the way to do it. But kind of unfortunately, in reality, it is. And obviously, we've seen the news today that Julian Nagelsmann has apparently pulled out of the Chelsea race, which is an interesting one because obviously he's someone of great interest to Spurs, and they've kind of looked at him twice in the past before. But just, I've never got the sense, or I haven't got the sense certainly in recent weeks, of anyone I've spoken to that knows him or has been in on the situation of having that sense that he's particularly interested in the Spurs job right now. Whether that changes or not as the weeks progress is another thing. But, you know, as I said in the last video, Spurs' kind of idea is to not pick or not select anyone who is they're a fallback option for. And, you know, if you're having to desperately convince someone to come and be your manager or head coach, it's not the greatest of starts to life and that relationship, is it? So, yeah, be interesting to see what happens with Nagelsmann. But like I say, I think I wouldn't say that him, you know, becoming no longer a part of the Chelsea race suddenly opens the door for Spurs. It makes it slightly easier in a sense, because you don't have that massive opposition to getting his signature. But yeah, I think some work would have to be done there if they were to pursue him as their main one. What I'm fascinated by, to be honest with you, is the whole aspect of Mauricio Pochettino and Chelsea. That's an interesting. I've used the word interesting about a million times. Is it already any interesting anymore? There's been so much going on. But Pochettino, it's incredible, really, to see the way that situation is developing. And we're at the stage where he seems to be a very viable candidate to become the next Chelsea manager. And if that were to happen, I'd be fascinated to see which ways the Spurs fans go with that. Because I think there will be maybe a large section of fans. We were talking about this again before the press conference, and we were all in kind of unanimous agreement that Spurs fans would find that very hard to accept, I think. A lot of them, if Pochettino decided to go to their local rivals. After all the talk about, you know, unfinished business at Spurs and all of this, I think they would struggle with that. Because, you know, regardless, I mean, because this is the key thing. This is the other side to the argument, is that Spurs have shown zero interest in reappointing Mauricio Pochettino. They haven't. I've been asking people around Poch and everything. And from what I understand, and also this is kind of coming from people within the club as well, there has been no contact made by anyone from Spurs with Mauricio Pochettino at this point. Just before I double checked before starting this video that there's been no kind of feelers put out to him from Spurs of whether he'd be interested in coming back, which is huge, really, when you see the calls for him to come back from the fans, the chants at the stadiums. So that's massive. And I think that we're at the stage where I think Pochettino himself, if Spurs did now decide they were going to go and try that option, which I still don't think they would anyway, it would be very much like, well, you're only doing that because the fans told you to. You don't really want me back. So with that in mind, you know, I guess would some of the anger be pointed towards Tottenham, Daniel Levy, the board, over, well, why have you not gone for Mauricio Pochettino when he's the one we want, say, the fans? There's definitely an aspect to that. that's when I say I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated to see which way the fan base goes. I'm sure it'll be splintered as it always is anyway. But I'm intrigued to see which people just think, well, regardless of all of that, Pochettino should not be going to a local rival. You know, he quite famously said, I'd never go to Barcelona or Arsenal. I think he said something about I'd rather be a farmer. But I think a lot of Spurs fans would lump Chelsea in that group as well of rivals. I know Mourinho eventually obviously came to Spurs when he said he'd never come to Spurs. But then as he said, well, they sacked me. And maybe Pochettino will say exactly the same thing about Spurs. But it's, yeah, that's going to be, you know, especially if he's a successor, that would be it's very difficult, I think, to watch. It'd be very difficult to see him for a lot of Spurs fans in that Stamford Bridge dugout. Personally, I think it would be a very similar-ish job to taking on the PSG job in terms of the pressure and the expectations. I guess the fact that he's going in there when they're such a mess maybe gives him a little bit more of a foundation to build upon, I suppose. A little bit more patience. But then this is Chelsea. Is there ever going to be patience? And the fact, obviously, he knows the Premier League inside out maybe gives him a benefit over the PSG job. And I think behind the scenes it'll be a little bit more straightforward than some aspects of life at PSG. But still, that's a big call from Poch. It is a big call. And look, he's been out of work now for a while, so I could absolutely understand the desire from him to just get back into work. And it looks like the Real Madrid job at the moment may not be coming up, and Ancelotti may be staying. So perhaps that was one of the other ones he was looking at. But yeah, I don't know where I'm at with it. I'll be honest. You can probably tell by the way I'm talking about it. There's a part of me that is surprised, would be surprised, if he went to, you know, the club he loves, one of their biggest rivals. I would be surprised. As in, not saying it's not going to happen. I'd be surprised at his decision-making process in that. However, I also understand that work is work, and if the place you love have zero interest in bringing you back, and they sacked you, do your loyalties remain with them? You know, is football a business where you can have these loyalties and maybe think like a fan? Maybe they can't think like a fan in these scenarios. So I do wonder whether in this current time, and with all of the anger towards Levy and the board that has been growing, I do wonder whether we're at a stage where maybe he does get more of it than Poch would. There's also a part of me that thinks, will one day in the future Pochettino be yet another ex-Chelsea manager that Spurs appoint? You can't rule it out. You can't. Yeah. God, if you asked me, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, would I be talking about Pochettino as potential Chelsea manager? I don't think I would have ever thought that was going to be the case. But here we are. Maybe. We shall see. I mean, their shortlist was quite interesting, but certainly the shortlist seems to be getting shorter by the day. Obviously, Luis Enrique appears to be out of the running as well.